Welcome to the Vitamin Professor podcast, brought to you by VRM Media, publisher of Vitamin Retailer and Nutrition Industry Executive magazines, in partnership with Nutraland USA. I'm your host, Gene Bruno, Professor Emeritus of Nutraceutical Science and Chief Scientific Officer of Nutraland USA. The purpose of this podcast is to help educate the dietary supplement industry about the science of nutraceuticals and other relevant topics. If you like what you hear and see, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let me tell you a little bit about our guest today, who I have known for decades, and I've worked with on multiple projects over that time. Dr. Tim Ziegenfuss is the Chief Executive Officer of the Center for Applied Health Sciences. He's a past president and fellow of the International Society of Sports Nutrition, a certified strength and conditioning specialist, and a consultant to several professional sports teams, athletes, and elite tactical personnel around the world. He's been quoted in Scientific American, published in more than 600 articles in mainstream magazines, and co-authored about 80 scientific publications and 8 textbook chapters, and has had numerous interviews and appearances in the top 25 national print media. His research interests include nutritional strategies to maximize health performance, adaptations to resistance exercise, and the identification of novel, naturally occurring bioactive nutrients. As a scientific advisor to the natural products market, his input has led to the creation of dozens of products that currently grace the shelves of every major retailer in numerous countries around the world and account for millions in revenues. Today, in his scientific advisory role for Nutraland USA, Dr. Z is going to talk to us about black ginger extract. Welcome to the Vitamin Professor, my friend Tim.
Hey, Gene. Great to be here. Thanks for that intro. That's, I think the best part about that intro was that you actually pronounced my last name correctly. So thanks for that. But like you said, it's been decades for you to figure it out. So, no worries.
Yeah, so I can't be given too much credit.
Yeah.
If after 30 years or so I can't say your name right, then
Right. Thanks for that. Good to see you. And again, thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. So let's just jump right into it. So please start by giving us a little background about black ginger. Where is it from? What is it used for?
Yeah. So everybody's probably heard of Siberian ginseng and American ginseng and so on. And so black ginger extract is AKA Thai ginseng. So it mainly comes from Southeast Asia, mostly Thailand. There are centuries of historical use there by the indigenous peoples, centuries of use for improving physical work capacity, treating stomach ailments and various inflammatory disorders. And we know from some recent for us, that there are basically 3 main areas of where black ginger might have some pretty cool implications for health. And that is decreasing body fat, improving physical fitness, and potentially improving sexual function.
Very good. And from what I understand as well about black ginger, if you look at some of the different compounds in it, it has a group of methoxyflavones, and it seems that the group, the polymethoxyflavones, seem to be the major compounds, giving it its.
So those PMFs, those polymethoxyflavones, those are part of the flavonoid class, which, as you know, comes from fruits and vegetables and herbs and all that kind of stuff that we should all be eating more of, but we don't, most of us anyway. They're considered to be the main bioactive compounds within black ginger. And there are mono and di and tri and tetra and penta methoxyflavones, but one of the most interesting ones is the 5,7 dimethoxyflavone, as you know.
Right. Most prevalent that's found in the most prevalent flavone found in black ginger, I believe.
Right.
Okay. One of the things that you're mentioning here is reduction of abdominal fat. So I know that's one of the uses in some of the research. So how exactly does black ginger go about helping to reduce abdominal fat?
Boy, that would be great if it really is as potent as we hope, based on based on what I consider, again, centuries of historical use, but over the last 10 years or so, there have been a number of studies that we'll get into. But let's start with body fat, right? There's white fat and there's brown fat. White fat is typically what we think of when we look in the mirror and we go, oh, I don't like the way my belly looks, or I don't like the way my thighs look, or the flab in my arm that waves back when I wave to people. That's white fat, and mostly what white fat does is it stores extra energy. Brown fat's a little bit different because it contains extra mitochondria, and so it gives that fat actually a brown appearance or a beige appearance. And so one of the main mechanisms that scientists think is going on with improvements in reduction of body fat or reduction of body fat period is that somehow these PMFs, or the 5,7-dimethoxyflavone, increases activation of brown adipose tissue and promotes thermogenesis, which is calorie burning. And so there was a really cool study that was published in 2015 in 20 men, actually, that measured using PET, positron emission tomography. So PET is a really cool imaging technique that scientists use to measure activation of certain tissues and so on. And so when scientists did this study in 2015, they used a tracer of glucose because when brown adipose tissue is activated, it burns calories by using glucose. So they were able to measure very accurately in men who took black ginger extract an increase in brown adipose tissue thermogenesis using the PET and tracer technology. So very, very cool stuff. Now, how does it do that? We don't really know. It could be helping regulate leptin and adiponectin, which, Gene, as you know, are two hormone-like substances released from body fat. And again, I guess I should back up a second. We used to think that white fat just sort of stored extra energy. We know now that that's not true. For a decade or longer, we know that your body fat is actually like a metabolic. It's a metabolically active tissue that releases hormones, right? Some of those hormones are good for you, and some of those hormones are. So some hormones help regulate appetite, and they help promote increases in energy expenditure, and others. Leptin, for example, when you have leptin insensitivity or your leptin is low, then you don't know when to stop eating and you just continue to eat. So one of the theorized mechanisms behind the activation in brown adipose tissue thermogenesis is that there's some regulation vis-a-vis leptin and adiponectin. And the other one is something called AMP-K. And AMP-K is also a little bit of resurgence in the. I have dogs. All good. AMP-K is considered to be one of the body's main energy sensing enzymes. And so when AMP-K is activated, it increases mitochondrial biogenesis, meaning literally the creation of more mitochondrial mass. And as you know from high school biology, somehow everybody remembers it's the powerhouse of the cell and it helps your body burn energy. So those are considered to be the main mechanisms behind, at least currently, brown adipose tissue thermogenesis that regulate this increase in calorie burning and ultimately result in reductions in body fat.
That's pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. I especially love the impact there in the mitochondria you were talking about. So, what are some of the studies, the human studies, that have been conducted on black ginger extract for reducing abdominal fat?
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. I don't know anybody who doesn't want less body fat in the abdominal area, right? We know that's sort of considered to be pathogenic or the fat that's very unhealthy to carry. So men and women carry fat in the abdominal section more so than in their hips and their glutes or their butt, tend to have more problems, metabolic dysfunction. So there's a healthy body fat distribution and an unhealthy body fat distribution. And the unhealthy body fat distribution is when you carry it in the midsection. It's called central adiposity. And so these studies, I'll go over a couple of them. First of all, it's not a quick fix. You're not going to see 20 pounds drop off in a month. These studies are typically conducted for at least 12 weeks. The first one was done in 2018. Oh, and most of these studies, again, they come from Thailand, they come from Japan, they come from India. Only one has been done in the U.S. so far. So we are trying to figure out, or take some clues from what Eastern medicine and cultural gurus already know, right, to be true. So the first study was done in Japan. It's 2018. Again, it's a 12-week study, placebo-controlled, double-blind, 76 men and women, so a pretty stout sample size. Subjects ingested 12 milligrams per day of polymethoxyflavones, the PMFs. And the bottom line, at the end of the study, indeed, there was a decrease in that central visceral fat, decreases in subcutaneous fat, and of course then decreases in total fat, and actually also an improvement, meaning a reduction in serum triglycerides. So, and
Nice.
these are, these aren't done via bioimpedance or anything like that. These are actually done using CT and MRI scans. So these are X-rays and magnetic resonance imaging. So these are very precise experimental techniques to measure those reductions. So that's the first study, and it's pretty cool. But you know how science works. The studies need to be duplicated. They need to be duplicated in other labs, by other research teams in other countries, and so on. So the second follow-up study was also a 12-week study. This was a 2021 trial. Again, 12 weeks, placebo-controlled, double-blind, 80 men and women. So very similar to the first study. Same dose, 12 milligrams per day of PMFs, same results. Statistically and clinically meaningful reductions in visceral fat, subcutaneous fat, and total body fat. So, and again, those were both done in Japan. Different research teams, but they were both done in Japan, as far as I remember.
Yeah, absolutely. I would just like to let our audience here know that I'm aware of another pilot study that's underway to test black
Indeed.
ginger extract, which
Yes.
Dr. Ziegenfuss here himself is the primary investigator for, using the Actazine material by Nutraland USA. So we're looking forward to that too. That'll be the second one in the U.S. then.
Now that's an 8-week study. So we're hoping for better results or equivalent results in a little bit shorter amount of time period. And we don't have a super large sample size, as you mentioned. So it's more of a
pilot. Yeah.
It's more of a pilot, but that's how you do good science. You use information from pilot studies to help tweak research designs and improve on the parameters, the outcome measures for follow-up studies that do use large sample sizes. And that Actazine that you mentioned, Gene, you may be too humble to mention this, but congratulations to Nutraland and to you for receiving the NIE, the Nutrition Industry Executives Award for Best New Weight Reduction.
Yes,
is that right? Yeah. So fantastic! Kudos to you. Hopefully.
Well, thank you for that. I would just mention that since last December, I've been working on losing weight myself, and while I was having success in losing weight, abdominal fat was very slow to decrease in me, the visceral in particular, and so I integrated the black ginger into my daily routine. And
I have since you dropped that pearl of knowledge or shared it with me several months ago, same. I'm doing the same thing. So I'm with you.
I just wanted to mention. So I've taken off more than 6 inches off my waist. Now I'm not going to say that was all from black ginger, but it was going super slow. Weight was coming off, but the abdominal weight wasn't coming off so quickly.
Yeah.
Once I integrated the black ginger, it started going, and now I'm over 6 inches down on abdominal. So I'm pretty happy about that.
That's fantastic. And it's interesting, and I forgot to mention it, but it's very relevant and germane to the conversation. That is, in the studies that I mentioned earlier, you're like, well, how do you know subjects didn't just eat less, right? And so part of what you do when you do a weight loss study like that is you track caloric intake and monitor it as closely as you can, knowing that people lie a lot. They tell little fibs about what they eat. So dietary records aren't the ideal way to do it. They're not super precise, but they're sort of the best we got, unless we were going to rent out a dormitory at a college or an apartment.
Yeah, right, and feed them, right.
Apartment building somewhere. Say, for the next 12 weeks, you're living here, and by the way, you're only eating the meals we give you, right? That would be an ideal way to do it. That's not the real world. The real world is, hey, listen, Don't do anything different. Don't join a gym and do a new exercise program. Don't follow any weird diet routine that you might have seen on Instagram. Just do what you do normally and add this in the morning or at noon. Just take about 12 milligrams of polymethoxyflavones from black ginger and see what happens. And so that's what those studies did that I mentioned earlier with those two, with the sample size of 76 and 80. That's what they did. And they didn't report any statistically significant changes in calorie intake or calorie expenditure. So, man, it sounds too good to be true. Is it? We'll find out.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. I've talked to a couple of other people. There's I'll tell you who when we're offline, but a gentleman we both know who's been in the industry a long time, who's been playing around with it, and he formulates products, and he's been extremely impressed with the results too. But
Great.
In any case, so let's go to some of the other areas of research. So, we know that black ginger extract can play a role in physical fitness. So tell us a little bit about the studies on that.
Yeah. So, traditional use, centuries of traditional use by some of these mountain tribes that, go up into the, literally do trekking through the mountains, and they need to carry a weighted pack and so on. And so that's where the clues first came from, I think, for using this ingredient, black ginger extract, to improve physical performance. So there have been a number of studies done. The first one, again, placebo-controlled, double-blind. So the standard way to do it, half the people get a placebo, the other half get the active. And this was in men and women, 19 to 60 years old. There were actually two doses. There was a low-dose group at about 3.5 milligrams of PMFs per day, and a high dose that was double that, so 7 milligrams per day. Again, the length of the study was 12 weeks. And very interestingly, both doses, and these are less than what, those doses are a little low based on my read of the literature, but both of those doses increased VO2 max, which for our listeners is considered to be the sort of the litmus test for cardiorespiratory fitness. VO2 max is the volume of oxygen that your body can take in and utilize. And so you would expect people like marathon runners and triathletes and so on to have a very high VO2 max, and they do. And let's say sprinters and weightlifters to have comparatively lower VO2 maxes than they do because it's a result of their training, right? So both of those doses, the 3.5 and the 7 milligram dose, increased VO2 max. However, the higher dose was the only one to increase sprint times during a shuttle run. And also, they measured several enzymatic markers of oxidative stress, and the high dose was shown to improve the antioxidant status. In other words, there's less oxidative stress.
Always a good thing. Yeah.
All good stuff, as well as decreased serum lactate. So lactate is the correct term, not lactic acid. So everybody knows lactate. Quite interesting. That was the first study. The second study, 194, just males, but they were adolescents. So this speaks to the efficacy and safety, not just in adults, but in adolescents. This used the 12 milligram dose per day of polymethoxyflavones. Again, it was 12 weeks. And this one, though, was interesting because the authors reported increases in strength, not dynamic strength, not like bench press or squat, because typically when you do a study and look for changes in strength, old school way of doing it, remember the hand grip? I don't know if you had
hand grip
class
test
in college, but you grab it and you squeeze it as hard as you can. It's called the hand grip dynamometer, right? They have that for grip strength, and grip strength actually correlates very well to mortality. Men and women with higher grip strength just live longer, healthier lives. It's very interesting because that's an isometric exercise, right? So there were improvements in grip strength, and there were also improvements in back and leg strength using the same kind of device. I don't know if you had that one, but you kind of like bend over, and there was a bar, and you had to try to lift it up using your back and legs, but it wouldn't move. You just had to exert as much tension as you could on it. Again, an isometric test. Both of those indices of strength were increased in the adolescents. VO2 max was increased again. 50-meter sprint time was increased. And the unique thing about this second study was that the researchers measured HRV. HRV is the acronym for heart rate variability. And heart rate variability actually measures the beat-to-beat interval, like the time interval between successive heartbeats. right? And it uses some pretty extensive and only well understood mathematical modeling by the researchers who do it routinely, to be quite honest. But it's considered to be, HRV is considered to be an indicator of autonomic nervous system balance or stress resilience. So autonomic.
That's how I've always known it, sort of
right
the stress
so,
resilience angle.
So autonomic nervous system, ANS, consists of the sympathetic branch and the parasympathetic branch. Sympathetic branch is fight or flight. You know, you're driving your car down the road. A little kid rolls a ball out into the street, and you slam on the brakes, and you're like, "Oh my God, what just happened?" You know, instant adrenaline release or epinephrine release, and so on. That's the sympathetic response. Parasympathetic response is sort of the rest and digest. So when you have good balance between those two sort of yin and yang systems, then you have better stress resilience. And based on the results from this first study, or excuse me, the second study, there was an improved stress resilience because some indices of HRV were improved in the group that took the 12 milligram dose of black ginger or polymethoxy.
And you know, that's a good thing, because when you think about adolescents, you think, oh, you know, they don't have stress like adults, but actually they have a tremendous amount of stress in school and peer pressure and social, all of that going on.
Yeah,
so if you can do something to improve that, that's a positive.
Agreed. And then there was a third study. This one was in soccer players. The dose was around 12, a little bit more than that. If you round, it's 13 milligrams. Again, it's 12 weeks. So we see this common thread of studies, at least that I've reviewed so far, that have shown efficacy. They're all about 12 weeks long. Maybe we should have done our CHS study for 12 weeks, but we want the data faster, so we'll see what happens, because ours is. But anyway, in this study of 60 soccer players, they just did a basic physical fitness battery. So I don't know if you remember these, but in school, again, it was like a sit and reach test, the hand grip dynamometer test, the shuttle run, and some other things. And the only thing that lit up in this study was an increase in grip strength. But still, something is better than nothing in these soccer players, because soccer players, again, depending on what level and whether they're in season or out of season, are already probably pretty high level athletes in terms of their cardiorespiratory fitness and their cardiorespiratory and sprint, their ability to sprint when they're tired, right? So that's why I'm not really surprised that they didn't show benefits here, because these soccer players were probably already pretty fit.
Oh my God, they're the most amazing group of athletes, in my opinion. I am not a person who loves to watch all different kinds of sports and gets into all of it. But if there's a soccer game on, or football, European football, if that's on, I just get completely focused on it, because it's so impressive to watch these athletes. It's just, they're amazing.
They're like thoroughbreds, you know, especially if you're a midfielder. You basically run almost, 3/4 of the field or more. It's incredible at a very high percent of your heart rate max. I wish they wouldn't fake being injured. That's the only thing that bums me out. But I respect the athletes in that sport, and I wish they could hit each other more. But that's just me.
Indeed. So, I mean, look, it's very cool to be able to see. So far, we're talking about two really meaningful areas of research. You know, abdominal fat, that's a huge thing, and also, then this physical fitness aspect of it, and improving performance, improving stress resilience, these things that you're seeing across different populations, adults, adolescents, professional athletes. I mean, that is, is very, very meaningful.
And I'd like to add to your point, most of the studies have been done in both men and women. I mean, there were a couple of men studies, but done in men and women, because oftentimes, as a physiologist, I like to start with the easier machine. You start with men, not because you're sexist, but because it's an easier machine to study, because women have more comprehensive metabolic and hormonal changes to try to control for.
That's right.
And that's why part of the reason why a lot of the initial literature has been done with men. But in this case, we see improvements in men and women, and that's
which is awesome.
That's very notable, and kids and adolescents, not kids, but adolescents. Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. Now, there is an additional area, and that is of research, and that is research in sexual health, or more specifically erectile dysfunction. I'd like you to address that just a little bit.
Well, first of all, I'm no expert in ED. I just want to put that out there. I'm an exercise.
That's what they all say, Tim. That's what they all say.
Physiology guy with with some expertise in nutrition, and I dabble in statistics. But yeah, so there are a couple of sexual health studies done. But I will say, in my read of this literature, there's copious amounts of data on in rodents and other sort of in vitro experimental models. So in those models, black ginger extract shines, the PMFs shine. There's much less info in men with ED, but there have been a couple of small trials.
Couple of studies, yeah.
First one was an open label. Oh, and by the way, the study that we're doing in my lab for body fat, we're also measuring indices of sexual function and sexual satisfaction because we're using men and women. So
nice.
Yep. So we're going to measure that as well and see what we get. But the first study to talk about is an open label study. Open label means everybody gets the active ingredient, and everybody knows that they're getting the active ingredient.
Right. So it's not controlled with a placebo.
No, it's not controlled with a placebo. So, and again, there are placebo responders who, you give them anything, and they're like, yeah, I feel great. Oh yeah, no matter what it is. It could be a placebo in a caffeine study, and you get people that swear they have the caffeine on that day, and they don't. They have a placebo. So this was an open label. So within the limitations of an open label research design, there were 14 men. They all complained of mild ED, erectile dysfunction. They were 50 to 68 years old. There was only a 5 milligram dose, so kind of low actually, of the 5,7 dimethoxyflavone. And the treatment period was only 30 days.
Okay? Yeah, pretty short.
No, pretty short, right? So a low dose and a low timeline, right? But despite both of those sort of maybe potentially negative things where you wouldn't expect to see much, researchers did report significant increases in erectile function and satisfaction with intercourse in these men. So that's a notable finding. But again, it's an open label one. There was a second study done as a follow-up where there were 3 groups. This was a placebo-controlled double-blind study in 45 men, a placebo group, a low-dose group that received 5 milligrams per day, and the high-dose group received 18 milligrams per day. And these groups took it for 60 days. So better than the first study, in my opinion. And the bottom line is the high dose worked, and the low dose really didn't do much, right? And one of the unique findings here, and again, that was for erectile dysfunction, and they actually made measurements. I'm not doing it in my lab, but they made measurements of length and girth in these men.
Right. So they're looking at the erection itself. And by the way, guys or women, whoever is listening to this, that doesn't mean it's going to take what you've naturally got and make it bigger or thicker. It means that you're getting a better erection, basically.
Right. Again, I'm no ED expert, but interestingly, in this study, they also met because they're like, well, what's the potential mechanism of action there? Is it nitric oxide or is it whatever? They didn't measure nitric oxide, but they did measure hormones, and they measured testosterone. They measured the major ones, testosterone, and then the 2 hormones that control testosterone production, LH and FSH, and they didn't see any changes in those. So this may mean if this study is duplicated with similar results, that the improvements in these outcome measures in these men with ED may be mediated by something other than alterations in those hormones. So that's interesting.
That is very, very interesting.
And as I mentioned before we got on, I found a 2024 meta-analysis that was just published in February that you didn't even know about. And
I didn't even know about that,
You're the expert, man. And in this study, there were a total of 897 subjects. And there were 16 studies. And so what a meta-analysis is it's a way to pool the results and data from many different kinds of studies, from different sample sizes and different outcome measures into one study so you can generalize the results. You say, what are we collectively, for the body of research that's been done so far on decent studies on black ginger extract, what can we say? What are we comfortable saying? And these authors concluded, and this is a new one, reduction in fasting blood glucose. Wow, that's quite interesting, especially nowadays, right, with the incidence of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes and so on. And again, decreases in visceral fat, increases in strength and isometric strength of the hands and the legs and the back, improvements in VO2 max, and potentially an improvement in like a 50-meter sprint. So I think I'm cautiously optimistic, honestly, at this point for this ingredient, for black ginger extract. I mean,
Yeah.
we certainly need more studies, and that's why we're doing, some of them here in the U.S. in my lab. But I think there's some smoke here. We'll see if there's a big raging bonfire, but there's
Yeah.
definitely some smoke. There's definitely some interesting findings so far. And again, the PET scan study that showed increases in brown adipose tissue thermogenesis was only done in 2015. So really, we're only 10 years in, man, on this ingredient in terms of the recent studies that have looked for these specific changes in visceral fat and physical performance, and then more recently sexual function. So it's kind of exciting.
Yeah, it's kind of like black ginger's the sexy herb, literally. Thinner, fitter,
Oh,
and better
yeah.
sexual health.
Yeah, can't get any better than that. I mean, and you guys are doing it right. I mean, I know a little bit about Actazing. Most products on the market are 10 to 15% PMFs and about 5% of the 5.7. And you
Right.
guys boast, I think, one of the highest, if not the highest on the market, like
Yeah,
35%.
35%.
Yeah, PMFs and 20% of the 5.7
Yeah.
dimethoxyflavone. Yeah, so that's what I look for when I buy, because you didn't give me any, so I had to buy my own. I bought my own from Swanson.
Well, I'm going to give you some at
Thank
Supply
you.
Side West,
Thank you.
and we're actually going to have it in those cool little oral strips that you can dissolve very quickly. It's going to
Yeah,
be
that's
very
right.
nice.
Not capsules, oral strips.
Yeah. So it's just kind of a cool delivery form, but yeah, and just as a formulator, one of the things that I like is when I'm putting products together, if I want to use more than one nutraceutical in something, the higher the dose that you have to use, the less you can fit of other stuff, and the less options you have for different delivery forms.
Sure.
So one of the nice things about it is because you have the higher percentage of the polymethoxyflavones, you're able to use a smaller overall dose of the raw material. So it's really going to fit so much better if you want to combine it with other herbs, other nutraceuticals. If you want to try a delivery form like the oral strip or a gummy or something like that, you don't have to worry so much about the taste and other issues that you might if you had such a, you have to use 500 milligrams or something,
Yeah. So tell me more about that oral strip, actually, because I'm intrigued. It's not like a nicotine patch, like not a like an
No. And just for anybody in industry who doesn't already know it, any of the topicals, the FDA has said that is not a dietary supplement, that's a drug. So don't do that. No, the oral strip, it's like if you've ever used like little Listerine oral strips you put on your tongue
Sure.
and it dissolves. Okay,
Sure.
it's that. But so here's the deal. It's convenient as an alternative for people who have difficulty swallowing pills, certainly. But the other thing is this. There are some nutraceuticals that you get some better absorption with when used in the buccal cavity here, and unfortunately, because of the way the regulations are, you can't make claims about that because then that's a drug delivery form. Nevertheless, if you dissolve it there and you dissolve it on the tongue and you let it be there, if absorption happens, and if not, you swallow it and you still get absorbed anyway, just that maybe you get a little absorption a little quicker, and it has that nice convenience factor of you slap it in, it dissolves really within seconds, and it's a very pleasant way to go about it. And no matter who the person is, anybody can use an oral strip. Some people have trouble with tablets or capsules. Some people have trouble with swallowing, whatever. Nobody has trouble with an oral strip. We're not selling the oral strip. We just think it's a cool delivery form.
Yeah.
And we're having that made. So, yeah.
Yeah, and note to self for our follow-up study, we should actually measure serum concentrations of the PMFs.
Yeah, we really should. That's going to help us. So, yeah.
No brainer, because one of the first questions a good scientist will have is, how do you know it got in? How do you know where it went? How do you know, did you look for it anywhere? Did you look for it in the urine? Did you look for it in the feces? Did you look for it in serum slash plasma? Those are fair questions. Those are valid questions.
Those are fair and valid questions. Of course, when you do that, some companies, as you well know, depending on the material, will just do a bioavailability study, to do a PK study, whatever, but don't actually study for efficacy. Just look to see if it's absorbed, and they're basically riding the coattails of existing, research. And so, well, I don't have to do that. I just have to do. But the ones who do both look at bioavailability and efficacy. That's the best of all possible worlds.
Agreed. And with all the recent research, very solid research, but still in relative infancy on microbiome, you should measure changes potentially in the microbiome, because there may be biotransformations in the gut, right, when it gets into the GI tract, that enhance some of the flora of the microbiome and microbiota. And so that could be a potential undiscovered mechanism, right, whereby
that's a cool idea too.
Maybe exerting some beneficial effects on the body. And if you don't look for it, if you don't measure it, then you're not going to find it. So because what we're measuring is actually the endpoints, right? We're measuring. Well, I don't really care how it works or what it does, right? We'll rely on the other stuff. Does it reduce body fat or not, right? Yes or no? Does it reduce body fat or not? That's the endpoint, right? That's what everybody wants to know. That's a consumer-friendly endpoint. Totally get it. And similarly with sexual function and sexual satisfaction, consumer-friendly endpoint, right? Similarly with physical fitness, any aerobic, cardiovascular, or anaerobic or strength or resistance train measurement, totally get it, because consumers will lock on to that. But we need to really understand the science. We need to do some of those biomarkers of mechanistic work, right? There's a lot to do. I guess my point is...
And to your point, a pilot study like the kind of ones that we're doing with you just kind of informs us towards what the next study is going to be. Right. We see how it moves the dial. We see what happens and go, here's an interesting area. So when we do our randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial with a larger population, we can say, okay, we're going to cover all these things and we're going to do some specific work in these areas as primary or secondary endpoints, just to see, and that's the beauty of starting out with a pilot study. You can see
Agreed.
What moves the dial and where to go.
Right.
So,
agreed. Right on.
Well, cool. Tim, I am just pleased as punch to have had you on my podcast, and look forward to seeing you at Supply Side.
Okay.
And looking forward looking forward to doing more work with you and more studies and all of that. And I'm just really glad that you're on our scientific advisory board, because you're one of the really smart ones in the industry. Always have been from the day I met you. Although
Thanks.
I will say there are some differences. You actually look like an adult male. Now, when I first met you, you looked like a teenager. You weren't, but you looked like it.
Yeah, well, we're all getting older and uglier. What are you going to do? But
no. Well, you still look great, but but now you look like a man.
Buddy, appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. And again, it's a pleasure being on your podcast and being on the advisory board for Nutraland. I enjoy it. Thank you.
Well, very good. So thanks again, Tim. And if you like what you heard today, you like what you learned about from Dr. Z here, please don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time on The Vitamin Professor.